is going to shepherd you through your process, and that may not be your dissertation advisor, and may not be someone in your department, and may not even be someone at your school. For me, the most important mentor that I had at Stanford was a retired faculty member, emeritus faculty. One of my most important colleagues is somebody who I took a single class with at one point. And I'm not even really friends with her. We are really different people and we lead very different lives. But man, can she read a draft and give me amazing feedback. And so, learning, I guess, piece of advice number one would be pick up that mentor who is going to connect you with people, who is going to teach you things, who is going to give you good advice, but pick up all these other people along the way and recognize you don't need to be friends with any of them. You will have these kinds of relationships where you'll have somebody who reads your stuff. You'll have somebody who can do quantitative research. You'll have somebody who writes about teacher education, right? You pick up all of these people just the same way that you pick up skills, right, and research methodologies, and that they actually end up being more important because I can go back and I can read a textbook, right, or I can teach myself particular kinds of skills, but I can't expand my network really beyond what it already is. And I picked up all these people in my network who make what I do easier, who make what I do possible. That said, I would say another piece of advice would be develop at least one methodological skill. Get really good at it, and be able to not ever have to deal with BS from journals about methodology. Just have your methodology down. I would say no matter what your methodology is, become conversant in quantitative methodology. Learn how to read a quantitative article and call BS on the person who is trying to pass off some nonsense research just because he or she, has a low p-value. So figure out what would you be doing as first-year doctoral students? Well, figure out what a t-test is, I guess. Start there and keep moving forward, and eventually figure out what hierarchical linear modeling is, right? That you don't need to be able to do it, but if you can read it, so I can't do most of that stuff, but I can read it and I can critique it, and I can be in the room with people who are talking about that, and I can assign tasks to people. And as long as you can assign tasks to people and then read their work and then be nice, but be critical of their work and ask for them to revise it, then you don't ever need to do it because you can have somebody else do it for you. That'd be another piece of advice. A third piece of advice would be to never waste your time publishing in junk publications. So the vast majority of academics publish in these fakakta journals that nobody reads and that have an impact rating of 0. Write one article and get it in a real journal that actually has an impact, rather than 5 articles that you get in, the Northeast Society of, men who love to knit quarterly. No, don't waste your time with that. Don't waste your time going to podunk conferences. Go to a real conference. It's better to present a poster session at a real conference than to be the keynote speaker at the Ladies Shoe Emporium annual meeting. What else? Learn how to write. If you don't know how to write, then nobody will read you. Take great care in your prose. The only reason why anybody has any idea who I am is because I know how to write. I don't have better research techniques than other people. I'm smarter than a lot of people, but I'm certainly not smarter than most people. Some of the stuff that I've looked into, it's not the world's most exciting stuff. I'm not setting the world on fire by choosing conflicts. It's that I am competing with a very small pool of other people who actually know how to write a sentence. Um, and so if you learn how to do that, then people actually read your work and you might have a little bit of influence outside the tiny little subfield that you will eventually become a part of, right? And that would be another piece of advice is don't become a member of a tiny little subfield. Have a foot in lots of different fields. People have no idea. I mean, the danger in this is people don't know how to classify me. Um, I don't go every year to the same meeting of, whatever subgroup I would be a part of. Some people think I'm a historian. Some people think I'm a policy analyst. Some people think that my research is in teacher education. Some people think that I do, school assessments. The truth is I do all of it. I want to be a part of all those conversations. That's ultimately way more interesting. It makes you way more relevant than if you just go to, the History of Education Society annual meeting. Um, and then, related to all that, I would say, begin making connections with people who are actually relevant. So that would be, first of all, in the educational realm, teachers, principals, district administrators, state policymakers, but also journalists. Again, one of the only reasons that anybody has any idea who I am is that I've cultivated relationships with journalists. They know that I know how to talk in plain English, and that I know how to make something sound interesting. Um, and so I end up getting quoted, despite the fact that I don't teach at Harvard. I teach at a small liberal arts college that is 45 miles west of Harvard. But I can sure give my colleagues at Harvard a hard time, when I'm on NPR and they're on somebody's internet podcast. Um, so figure out who is out there and how you can be a part of their story. And then I guess the last piece of advice would just be personal, and that would be remember that we're all going to die, and this is all a game. People get so worked up over this stuff, particularly doctoral students who think they'll finish their dissertations in however many years the world is going to end. The world, trust me, is not going to end if your dissertation takes a year longer in gestation. And in fact, given the quality of most dissertations, the world may be a better place if your dissertation takes a year longer than ultimately, this business is it's easier to convince ourselves that this matters than it is if we were, say, I don't know, selling pots and pans. It's easier for us to say, no, I'm making the world a better place. But ultimately, the impact that all of us can count on making, regardless of profession, is zero. You can count on a zero impact. Maybe you make a bigger impact, but you can't count on making an impact. And so if you're making yourself miserable along the way with a guarantee of zero impact at the end, that's what you're guaranteed. You may have more. That's the minimum guarantee. It's not like the minimum guarantee when you go and ed research is, you're going to be like a 9 on a scale of 1 to 10, in which case you should be real nervous the whole time about whether or not you're getting things right. With the odds being that maybe none of us in this world are going to have too much of an impact, and life is real short. I would say don't freak out about things. You don't do well on a paper, and really nobody cares. Your dissertation takes a little longer, really not a big deal. Your first article, never gets cited. At least you have people who love you, and the sky is still blue, at least on some days, and there are mountains to climb and rivers to fish in. I think remembering all that stuff was a big part of why I thought getting my doctoral degree was incredibly fun. Whereas I kept looking around and seeing all these people freaking out around me who forgot the fact that we were basically being paid to read books and write papers and talk to smart people. Yeah, it's a pretty good job when you think about it. And whatever happens at the end, I guess this will truly be the fun piece of advice. Whatever happens at the end of your doctoral degree, right? Hopefully you're doing this because you think that the act of studying itself is worthwhile, right? There were a lot of people who were getting their PhDs as a means to an end. They want to get somewhere. That's not the worst practice in the world, but hopefully if your goal is to get somewhere, then your route for getting there isn't completely miserable. I went into my doctoral program knowing maybe I would never get a job as an academic. It's a killer market out there. And it only got worse while I was in my doctoral program when the market crashed. But I went into it knowing no matter what, even if I just go back to my classroom teaching the same classes that I was teaching before, I'm going to have 4 or 5 or 6, turned out to be 5 years to think and reflect and learn and work on a completely flexible schedule. Go on to that seemed like a pretty worthwhile investment of time. And so, I would tell any doctoral student, just, remember that you're a person first and everything else second.
That was definitely some good advice, because before we called you, we were just, I guess, venting to each other and just saying how frustrating it is at the moment.
Well, you can be frustrated, but you can also be happy at the same time.
Well, thanks again. You're great to listen to. I could do this. I'm sure you've got 1,000 other things to do, but I could listen to you talk all afternoon. But
yes, thank you so much.
Well, there's a little 6-year-old who's going to be coming home in 5 minutes from her swim lesson.
Oh, okay.
So listening to me would be a pretty different experience once she opens the door.
Well,
thank you again.
For your time.
Sure thing.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good luck. Bye-bye.
Hey.
I didn't know how to hang up on just him.
I know. Hey,